Joining me now from Kharkiv, Ukraine, is NBC Chief Foreign Correspondent Richard Engel and former U.S. Ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul. Richard, give me the reaction, what you're hearing there from Ukraine's president and also Ukrainians to all of this back and forth involving Vladimir Putin.
Well, President Zelensky has said repeatedly that he believes that Putin is just stalling for time, that this is a tactic that he's using to continue the war. And Putin is in the midst of an offensive right now. He's carrying out an offensive against Ukrainian troops in the Kursk region, which is inside Russia. He's been carrying out attacks all across eastern and southern Ukraine. I'm actually in the city of Mykolaiv right now, but there was an attack earlier today in Kharkiv. It was actually a Russian attack that hit a hospital. It set the roof on fire. And then as rescue workers were trying to put the fire out, the Russians hit the building again and wounded an emergency worker. We were earlier today, not far from the front line in Kherson, and we were talking to people there as they were trying to collect debris from the ground, secure the site, rebuild some of the housing, at least clear away debris so it could be safe. We spoke to people and they said that it seems that President Trump has this backwards, that he is putting pressure on Ukrainians. He is asking them to give up concessions and is playing with kid gloves with Vladimir Putin, giving him extra time, making him seem like the peacemaker, and President Zelensky look like the obstacle.
I think a lot of people, though, can read between those lines. Richard, thank you so much. I know you have more reporting to get to. Appreciate your time. Moving to you, Ambassador. Russian President Vladimir Putin says he supports a ceasefire with Ukraine, but he apparently wants conditions. The Kremlin also says there is reason to feel cautious optimism about a ceasefire. You've met Putin. What is his endgame here?
Well, first, I just want to say thank you for Richard for his tremendous reporting from the front lines. We are lucky to have him on our team.
Agreed.
Every time I see him, I just deeply appreciate his work. With respect to Putin, I've not just met him, I've been part of negotiating teams with him. And what we're seeing is classic Putin behavior. President Trump gave him a series of concessions from the beginning, right? Hinting that we will not put our soldiers as part of a peacekeeping force. We will compel the Ukrainians to give up territory occupied. No NATO membership. Voting with Russia and North Korea and other rogue states at the United Nations, right? That was our strategy. Give him concessions and hope that he'll do something nice in return. And guess what he did? He doubled down. He wants more things. That's classic. I mean, basically, it's classic negotiating for anybody, but especially Putin. So now what we're hearing in return for signing the ceasefire, after getting all of those concessions, he's now saying he's added more conditions, right? No weapons to Ukraine. They have to stop mobilizing their forces. And now the Trump administration faces a really hard choice. Are they going to give him more, or are they going to start pushing back? I hope they start pushing back.
Look, President Trump says he can do things that would be bad for Russia, says he has leverage against Moscow. But will he do it? Will he ask Putin for concessions? And if so, what could they be?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, remember, with Ukraine, the Trump administration cut off military assistance, cut off intelligence assistance. And some Ukrainians are claiming that latter is hurting them in the battle in Kursk that Richard was just talking about. I'm just repeating what I've heard. I can't confirm that. So he's used coercion against the Ukrainians. He hasn't against Russia. There are two obvious things he could do to put more pressure on Putin to negotiate in a more serious way. One, provide more military assistance to Ukraine, and two, to increase sanctions on Russia. And there are a myriad of things he could do, easy things he could do. He could start, for instance, by seizing the Russian central bank assets that sit in American bank accounts right now. There are many other sanctions he could do. So far, all he's done is threaten to sanction Russia. He's actually never done it. Now would be a good time to do it.
So President Trump posted today on Truth Social about the Witkoff-Putin meeting with this quote: "We had very good and productive discussions with President Vladimir Putin of Russia yesterday. At this very moment, thousands of Ukrainian troops are completely surrounded by the Russian military and in a very bad and vulnerable position. I have strongly requested to President Putin that their lives be spared. This would be a horrible massacre, one not seen since World War II." What are the chances Putin listens to Donald Trump on this?
Well, two things about that statement. A very good and productive meeting with Putin. People need to understand why. Because they're giving Putin everything. And they're putting a gun to the head of the Ukrainians, forcing them to surrender. So this framing, we need to be careful about just accepting President Trump's framing, number one. And number two, the Ukrainian officials, many, the defense, Zelensky himself, have now reported that what is just stated there is not true. And it sounds like that statement about the soldiers being surrounded in Kursk comes directly from Vladimir Putin. And again, we shouldn't be surprised by that, because we've seen many times, most famously at their Helsinki summit, when President Trump, instead of listening to his own intelligence, listens to Putin instead. That's a very dangerous situation.
Indeed. By the way, all those accolades you afforded to Richard Engel, they apply to you too, my friend. Thank you so much, Ambassador. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.